everyone, and welcome to Season 3, The Voice of Luxury. My name is Lucy Challenger, and I'm the CEO and founder of Polo and Tweed. I am absolutely delighted to introduce to you today Jenny O'Neill. Now, Jenny is the clinic director at Aspire Clinic, an amazing aesthetics clinic based in West Berkshire, Reading. I'd really love for all our listeners to just dive straight into your journey and understand a little bit about your background, your career, all the amazing things you've learned, and how we got to the point where you are now running your clinic.
I'm basically a nurse. That's how I started my career, but I've grown that a little bit. So I then became a midwife and then a health visitor. Then I did a degree in teaching. So I used to teach nurses and midwives in the community. Then I did a degree in prescribing. So I am an independent prescriber. I can prescribe with the same prescribing rights as a doctor. So I was in the health service for over 20 years. I'd always wanted to go into business. So my business career started doing healthcare recruitment, and I bought a franchise in a healthcare recruitment business, and I grew that quite successfully, and I ended up selling it and ended up with an experience where I had a business experience side to me, and as well as a medical qualification side. And I then went into business development director roles with pharmaceutical companies and people that were doing clinical research, and I was basically promoting the work that those companies did to people that wanted to use them. And then I got headhunted by two people. One was a baby nutrition company who wanted me to do their national sales director role. And the other one was the leading cosmetic surgery and aesthetic company in the UK, who had a big Harley Street clinic, but they also had about 22 clinics around the UK and Ireland. So I started off as a regional director for them and ended up being asked if I could ditch that role and then come and work in Harley Street and run their clinic, because it wasn't running hugely efficiently at the time and needed a little bit of leadership in there. So that's what I did. And I sort of ticked all the boxes for 18 months, tripled the revenues, got it running efficiently, thinking I'd got my badge of honour and I could actually going back to doing my regional role, which I was really enjoying. And in the end, they said, actually, no way, because we need you in London, and could you go to Belfast and Dublin and all the other places where they had clinics and just sort of do the same thing again. I fell out of love with the whole Harley Street thing in the end, because I am very much a people person, and I really wanted to create something that was all about building relationships. You know how sometimes things just fall into place. The bank offered to loan me the money. I met Sir John Medeski, who said to me, I've got a space in the football stadium for you, a very private place on the top floor. Would you like it? I met some really lovely people who wanted to work for me. I sort of went along a pathway of opening my own clinic in Berkshire. I've been there now for about 15 years. We started off, obviously, with that whole thing about building relationships, giving people good value for money and giving people the best possible results. That was my promise. And it seems to have stood us in good stead. So we have about 4,500 regular patients coming through now, and it's a busy little place.
Wow.
So that's my sort of story.
That's amazing. I mean, gosh, to have that span of working originally back as a nurse and then all those different aspects and that management side, which often doesn't go hand in hand. I mean, my parents are medical, and both my parents, I have spent a lot of time around doctors and nurses, and I'm always so taken aback and humbled by how people in the healthcare system typically go into it to help people. But then you also have to be incredibly organized, you have to be incredibly managed, you have to be good with dealing with people. It's not just about bedside manner and how you look after someone. It's all these other things, and you've combined both clearly your ability to look after people and give them what they are needing, but also with that management side, which isn't always easy. How do you find the balance? Were you always just naturally very organized and had a good business head, or was that something that you had to learn over the years?
I think I'm quite well disciplined and well organized, but I think it's all about, and I'm not saying I'm the best organised person in the world. It all comes down to the relationship, doesn't it? Which takes you along pathways that you need to go, and not necessarily, I'm not giving people, I'm always running over time. People will tell you that, but I say to all my patients, I give you all my time, and it's as much as you need. So forgive me if I run over a bit, because, it will be because I've needed to explain something more clearly or more carefully to somebody who's a bit nervous, and who needs a bit of hand holding, etc., etc. But I do the same for you all, so they do forgive me. But they do always say, "Is she on time today?" Yeah.
And what is it, do you think, is it linked to why you first went into nursing? But what is it that sort of inspires you to wake up every day and go to work and face each new challenge that you find?
I think in basic, it sounds a bit corny, but I absolutely love it. People say, when are you going to retire? But actually, while I'm still loving it, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. And I think that really applies. And, I can't wait to get up and go and be involved. And I get a lot of satisfaction about what I achieve for my patients. And it is all about the fact that I've built that relationship. It's like going to see friends every day, except it's in a work environment. I can't actually imagine life without it, which is a little bit sad, but hey ho.
No, I mean, if you can have passion for your work and love it, I mean, that's the dream, right? For people to get up every day and go to do something that they are inspired to do and love. I would like to talk more in a moment about, your career path and how others could perhaps get into that line of work. But I wanted to reflect firstly a question that I often think of when it comes to, aesthetics and the more kind of, less all medical care is needed, but there are some that are urgent care. If you've broken your arm and leg and you end up in A&E versus someone choosing to have something that's perhaps going to change their appearance, and people will have their own opinions as to the aesthetic world, as to whether it's good or bad or whether it's necessary, etc. But if someone was wanting to go down some form of aesthetic route, I've heard the horror stories about, just turning up to a clinic, even in Harley Street, that you haven't done your research on. What would be your advice about someone wanting to find a clinic? Obviously, come to your clinic, Aspire Clinic, if they can. But if they're, not local and they don't have the funds to travel, or they're in another country, what would be your advice about looking for the right kind of aesthetic clinic to go to for treatment?
I wouldn't say it's a difficult one, but I do think there are some aspects of how a clinic is positioned and how it runs that you can have some very strong indicators in terms of, how good they are and how well they're going to look after you. First of all, I would say look for CQC registration. That means that the Care Quality Commission are the people that are making sure that that clinic is regularly inspected and it's running to the right standards in terms of safety, in terms of infection control, and all of those things. And the standards of the people that are working there are also part and parcel of that regulation. So I think that's a really important thing. There are other organisations called that I think are really good at recommending clinics, not just from the CQC perspective, but also from their standards of service and their standards of achieving really good results. And that's people like Safe Face, who are a fairly new organisation, but really good at not only representing the patient and recommending clinics that are really good at what they do and have high standards, but also representing the clinics themselves, giving them a service that allows them to update themselves and to keep in the swim with everything that's going on, in the environment of aesthetics. And that's really important because you know what it's like in any profession. You're juggling, aren't you, your sort of practice with your education, with your continuing professional development, all of those things. So if you've got an organisation that helps you do that and keeps you in the swim of what people are concerned about and what's going on out there that isn't perhaps recommended, etc., etc.
And what would you say the differences are between, because I see, particularly in the UK, more and more, I guess, beauticians starting to offer injectables and things that, quite frankly, could be quite dangerous if done the wrong way, or you hear about horror stories about fillers being done the wrong way. What are the main, apart from the obvious differences between going to a clinic like yours where you're a qualified nurse and or doctors, etc., versus going to someone who's a beautician? What would you say are the sort of factors to consider with that?
A beautician's training is not anything in comparison with a nurse's training. Now, I'm not dissing what beauticians do, because if they stick to the things that come into beauty and are within their qualifications and their remit, they're great. And actually, I quite often think, when you get a nurse looking after you, she will clean your face, and she will sort of maybe do some massage when she's done her treatment, etc. And it's not the same as when a beautician does it, where it feels all lovely and what have you. We have very different skills, but I think it's a bit like any other profession. Trying to be something that you're not qualified for is false and fraudulent and frankly dangerous. So I think stick with what you know, stick with what you're qualified to do. Don't step outside of those guidelines. From a patient's point of view, please make sure that your practitioner is qualified, not only qualified, but really experienced. Because I know people go to dentists who maybe do the odd, filler, Botox, whatever, but it's not what they do every day. You need somebody who is doing that practice every day and is an expert in what they do. That's not a beautician, and it's not necessarily a dentist. It's about people that are offering a medical aesthetics service and of quality, and they're experts in what they do.
That's key. And I think that's the big thing, isn't it? Is it's not just necessarily someone's qualification or background. Actually, like you're saying, well, obviously that is a very major part of it, but it's also the regularity of how much they're doing it. Because if you're going to have a treatment that could potentially, affect your health and damage your health if it was done in the wrong way, that if someone's only doing it once every 6 months, like you mentioned, sort of dentists or whatever their regularity, you're putting yourself into their hands and potentially taking risks with yourself. And I think because of social media now, because we see so much of people of all ages, making tweaks or making changes to their body as so they can do if they should choose to do that, it sort of lessens the ramifications and risks that are associated with these things, because it becomes sort of a bit slapdash and people think, oh, anyone can, chuck some Botox into a forehead and we'll all be good.
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. I think that unfortunately, social media and general publicity of these things is a lot to blame, because then patients get the impression that any old person can stick Botox in your face, and you can get cheap Botox, but it's a cheap product, and it's not a quality product that you would want to have in your face. And secondly, it's the person putting it in there. Do they know their anatomy? Do they know their muscle structure? Do they know this, how to deal with side effects if there are any, etc., etc. It's about safety. And I always say one of the things that I promise to do is give you the best possible treatment in the safest possible way. So for instance, if I was doing somebody's Botox for the first time, I'd be very conservative about what I was going to do to start with, very accurate, but very conservative. I would then see them again in 2 weeks' time, because it takes 2 weeks to fully develop the Botox reaction. Then I would examine them again. If I need to do any tweaks or top-ups, they're all free of charge, but it's about me being able to give them the best possible results in the safest possible way. And I keep a record of everything that I do, so that when they come again, I know exactly what I've done and I can repeat it, and we make sure that everybody's happy.
Absolutely. And that's what you've brought up there, the aftercare aspect, I think is also a major difference between people like yourself who are qualified nurses and running medical operations versus the beauty world. And I remember my parents telling me a long time ago, you should never be cutting costs when it comes to medical aspects, because we forget how much things cost, because of course we have the NHS in this country, and so we're not paying for, apart from our taxes hopefully, and we're not paying for our medical support, so we don't realize the costs that actually are entailed in, medical things. And like you mentioned, cheap Botox, they have huge ramifications when used on the body. And then if you look at people who are sort of dashing off to Turkey to get procedures done and having massive complications and having no aftercare, my parents always ran sort of the point home that a good medical practice, be it for, urgent care or indeed, cosmetics or aesthetics, the aftercare is as important as the treatment itself.
We have an open door policy. I always say to patients when they leave, if you're worried about anything, and I'm not expecting you to be worried, but if you are, you phone me or you pop back in. This open door policy, it's really important, because I think people often feel in places that don't perhaps pay so much attention that, there you are, you're done, off you go sort of thing. Where do they go if they're worried, or, if they think there might be a complication, etc. Particularly, I think surgery abroad is hugely dangerous, even in the best hands. So when I ran the big Harley Street clinic, we did surgery as well. So that, again, is very much part of my experience for 7 years. And there are lots of potential complications, and that's fine as long as you've got the expertise to deal with them. It's part of the pathway, really. But if you don't, people can get into trouble really quickly. An infection and what it can do to somebody and permanently damage or scar them is really, it's really not worth the risk.
The risks are definitely something that people need to consider and look to come to, clinics like the ones you run, to make sure that they keep safe. So if people are listening to this and thinking it a little bit more about sort of the career side of things, perhaps they're interested in working in aesthetics or becoming a nurse, or, what would be the 3 tips that you could give to someone who was looking to enter working in the areas that you do?
I think, first of all, obviously have the professional qualifications, and, so that goes without saying in terms of what we've just been talking about. But beyond that, I've had some really good people in terms of their qualifications who don't have the personal skills, and this business is all about having personal skills as well. People have to trust you and they have to love you, and it's actually about having some qualities in your personality and in your love of people, really. Because I think if you radiate that care and love, people feel it. It's about embracing people in the right way. But beyond that, you have to love it, and people have to love you. So I would say, it's those 3 things.
And what do you attribute to your success in this field? Is it your passion and your love of people? Or could you sort of pinpoint one or 2 things that you think has made you become successful in this area?
I think it is the way that that I care about people. I think that people feel the love within me. I would feel that I had failed if I hadn't cared for somebody in the right way, and that can be very different things for different people. I keep in touch on a regular basis. I'll give them a ring after their procedure, make sure that they're okay if I haven't heard from them. I give them my card, which has my mobile number on it. They can phone me at weekends and things. So that doesn't suit everybody. But for me, it's kind of part and parcel of what I do, and it is my clinic, so it's my reputation as well that, is important. But it's not a job to me, I love it. When I was in nursing, somebody once said to me, being a nurse is actually quite a selfish thing, because you have a need in you to do what you do and for people to appreciate it. And I think that's probably the same for me. I love that, that 2-way thing, and people appreciating what I do. And somebody said to me the other day, "You've made such a difference to my life," and I was sort of, I was really taken aback by it, and I was thinking, well, how could that be, really? But she said, it's just the way you've cared for me, and I feel better about myself. I feel confident. I feel like I radiate the best of myself, and but I still look like myself, and that again is really important, that people like themselves, but they're the best version of themselves, sort of thing. And we age we age positively. So it's not about changing people, it's about helping them to age positively and feel confident.
That's a really beautiful way of looking at it, because I think there is still, I mentioned earlier, I think there is still a reaction sometimes people have about the aesthetic or the cosmetic world. They think, that it's vanity, or that you're purely doing it for other people. And I actually had this debate with my husband the other night. He said, why do you put Botox? Because I have Botox. Why do you put Botox in your face? And I said, well, it's the same reason I dye my hair. I prefer my brown hair because it feels like me. And yes, I've got grey hair because I'm 40, and I've had, a baby, and I've had some stress in my life. And my mum went fully grey at 40, so it's also genetics. And actually, I like how it makes me feel. I'm not doing it for other people. I'm not doing it, I'm not even really doing it for vanity. I'm doing it because it allows me to feel the best version of myself now. And I often, I understand people have reactions, but you must see it all the time. People coming with perhaps some insecurities or feeling some sadness about, things that are happening, not just age, and wanting to be the best version of themselves. And that must be really beautiful to see.
It is, and it's actually about holding people's hands and walking that pathway with them. And sometimes that path takes you in lots of different ways. It's really important to listen, because, what I think isn't actually about what they might need or what might be helpful isn't important. It's actually about what bothers them and how they feel about themselves. Obviously, over the years, I will look at somebody and we'll be chatting, and I'll be thinking, well, actually, I can see what you're going to ask me in terms of helping you with. And actually, they come up with something completely different, and that's always quite interesting too. When I'm taking notes, I always write down the first three things that people say to me are important with them. So whether that's they're concerned about their skin or their acne scarring or their wrinkles or whatever it might be, you learn by your mistakes. There was a chap that came in and he had the most enormous hanging mole sort of from his neck, sort of hanging down like an earring. Would you like me to remove that for you? Because I can do it quite easily with cryotherapy, and it won't leave a mark or whatever. And he said, oh no, he said, I love it. He said that my father had one, my grandfather had one. It's like a family heirloom. And it taught me a lesson, because I thought, I've actually probably insulted him by even suggesting it. I was trying to be helpful. So now it's not, it's really about what people tell me and about giving them a solution. I do invest a lot of time in researching the most cutting edge treatments that are really going to work. So I don't have anything in my clinic that doesn't really work. So when people invest, they invest in something that they're going to get really great results from. But yeah, it is about, my latest investment is a treatment called M-Face, which believe it or not, is completely non-invasive. It's a comfortable treatment. There's no downtime, and it gives the most amazing results in terms of lifting the face. So, we have an applicator here, applicators on the forehead, and you just lie there and let it stimulate your muscles, smooth your skin. The result after 4 20-minute treatments is absolutely incredible. Obviously invested a lot of money in those sorts of treatments, but actually it's worth every penny in terms of the results it gives. And you have to really, I think that's probably something I should have mentioned earlier, you have to really do your research and keep up with the cutting edge technology, because there's some amazing things out there today. There's also some stuff that you shouldn't even dream about using, because it's not good. Again, when you're choosing a clinic, look at the technology they've got and the knowledge that they've got, what they've got to offer you, because if you've only got a hammer, you can only bang in a nail.
And what about lasers? Tell me a little bit about lasers, because I hear that a lot. I've never had any laser work done. And I hear, you hear all the sort of celebrities in Beverly Hills talking about having lasers to help increase collagen and, decrease aging or lines or whatever it is. Tell me about that. Do you offer anything like that at your clinics?
Yeah, we do. We offer a variety of technological solutions, but and also just for clarification, a laser isn't a laser isn't a laser. So, people call things lasers that actually aren't so. There are different varieties of laser too. So, doing different things. We have a medical intense pulse light machine, which isn't actually a laser, but it a laser, it involves light, so it gets confused. It does an amazing job on reducing pigmentation, reducing little blood vessels, and stimulating collagen and elastin, and giving people a really clear and improved skin quality. That actually isn't a laser, but people would perhaps think it was. We do have lasers as well. We do, the basics in terms of laser hair removal, but also thread vein removal and those sorts of things. But you can have lasers for all sorts of things, complete skin resurfacing, which I think I don't invest in because I think they're very harsh and there's a lot of downtime. And I do think there are other treatments that give you just as good results without the horrendous amount of downtime. So I look at when I'm looking at technology, I'm looking at balancing it out in terms of the downtime as well. One of the other treatments that we offer is something called Neogen, which is using plasma technology. Plasma is a pure energy to resurface and tighten the skin and again produce collagen and elastin. There's a little bit of downtime, but only 3 or 4 days. Produces the most amazing results. There are lots and lots of ways of stimulating collagen and elastin, not just through lasers, but laser is one of them. And really what you're doing is you're agitating the fibroblasts. The fibroblasts produce collagen and elastin and start to really deteriorate in their efficiency from the age of 21. So by the time you get to, my old age, if we can stimulate them, and that's usually by disturbing them or even damaging them, because we sometimes make the skin heal itself by damaging the fibroblasts and making them produce more collagen and elastin as a healing response.
Absolutely. And it links back to our earlier discussion about how much knowledge and qualifications are needed to do things like this. Because as a layperson, I, like you said, think a laser is a laser. If it emits some kind of light, I'm going to assume it's a laser because I am not qualified and not trained to understand the difference. And like you mentioned, downtime is different for different types of procedures and lasers. And these are all things that people need to come to a clinic like yours to be able to have that support in the right way, rather than, making the mistake of sort of having a treatment that then doesn't give them the results or gives them worse results from the offset. It's really valuable, the information you're sharing with me. You mentioned the story about the mole and how you learned from that earlier. Can you I mean, you must have seen a lot in your time, both through your career and in Harley Street and now at your clinic. But are there any sort of more unusual stories or anything that you could share with us that you think back to and think, wow, gosh, that was a moment?
I think they say there's a story in every one of us, and I think if I was writing my book, it would have to be Harley Street, because doctors and nurses and stuff that goes on, and sometimes you kind of even you think you've heard it all, and actually then something's really surprises you. And I think actually I'm sort of old enough in the tooth to know that I was kind of around when Facebook and stuff were coming in. People used to come and say, "Oh, did you, Jenny, did you know so and so and so and so was going on?" And I said, "Well, how do you know that?" "Well, they wrote, they said something on Facebook." And I was thinking, "Oh, right, okay." I used to have to tell some of the surgeons off because they go out on the fire escape to have their cigarettes and what have you. And so when I first had the Harley Street clinic, there were ashtrays on the consulting room desks,
Wow.
where the yeah, no, honestly, terrible, isn't it? You can't imagine it now. I always remember this poor chap coming into Harley Street, and he wanted to make a complaint, and he wanted to see the clinic director, and nobody else would do la 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 la. Anyway, so I said, yeah, no, send him in. And so he came in and he said, "Do you know," he said, "I have been here an hour and a quarter." He said, "And people, I got sent." So just to give you a flavour, we had 3 floors. I had 40 staff and 16 surgeons and a theatre in the basement. So it's a big place. So he'd been sent up to the 2nd floor, and he'd been there for an hour and a quarter. And I said, "I'm so sorry." I said, what did you book in for?" And he said, "Well, I came in to have some Botox. I said, oh. So anyway, so I said, just bear with me a moment. So I phoned reception. I said, look, I've got Mr. So-and-so here. I said, and he's very upset because he's been here an hour and a quarter waiting for his appointment. Everybody's ignored him. And she said, Jenny, I'm so sorry. She said, I thought he said buttocks and he'd come in to have his buttocks lasered. And I sent him up to the second floor where the laser hair treatment was. Anyway, of course, I started laughing, and the chap sitting in the chair next to me, and he's looking at me and said, I've come in to complain. Now you're laughing at me. Anyway, I said to him, look, I'm so sorry. But I said, this is what's happened. They thought, you said buttocks and not Botox. And it's caused a muzzle. And I said, what you're going to do today is you're going to come with me. Your Botox will be completely complimentary. And I'm so sorry about the mistake. And I hope you forgive us. And anyway, he went off and had his Botox. And then he came back and he said, I just wanted to say thank you. He said, and just to let you know, me and my hairy buttocks are just about to leave here. I had a laugh about it, but I always remember thinking he must think I'm so rude because I couldn't help laughing when the receptionist told me what she got muddled up about.
I mean, Botox and buttocks does sound quite similar, so I feel like that's a fair mistake. But he would have got a shock if he'd been taken into the laser section for the hair removal and then asked to drop his pants. He'd have been like, wait a second. That's not where I want the Botox.
Yeah. I did say to him, I've saved you from a huge embarrassment, having to strip off and lie on the bed.
He'd have been like, this is a strange service. As he's lying there naked. What's happening to me now? That's very funny.
But he did, again, sometimes with things like that, if you deal with people's complaints in the right way, they then become your friends for life. So I didn't, he was back again before too long.
Speaking of men, do you see an increase now in men getting things like Botox and aesthetic procedures? Is that becoming more commonplace now and more acceptable?
Yes, I think probably if I was to kind of guesstimate, probably about 30% of our patients now are men. There's a big thing where, certainly after COVID and after recessions, where men wanted to posture themselves as being, one of the, young men in the workplace and not the old boy sort of thing. They want to be seen as, very much part of the team and not stand out in that way. Men have become more educated as to what's possible. I still think there's a lot of men that frown, think everything's Botox. I mean, Botox is actually quite a small part, although we do a lot of it, it's actually quite a small part of what we do, and we do some amazing stuff out there, which is sometimes a bit disappointing when everybody sort of brings it back down to Botox. I think if you manage them in the right way, you can then take them along the pathway of finding things much more acceptable. But I would say in general, men have far more hang-ups about these things, almost like in the old days. When I first ran Harley Street, I had people sort of almost walking in the front door with paper bags over their heads because they didn't want to be seen to be there. Men are a little bit like that, they're a bit sort of running in the back door and sort of running up the stairs. Again, it's starting to go along that pathway where they're much more open. They're a long way behind the ladies, really, in terms of acceptability.
And I think it's interesting as well, you mentioned earlier talking about being conservative when you first treat patients and not, doing too much for them to begin with, because I think there's also that fear with men that they don't want to look like they've had lots of work done.
Yeah.
If a woman has maybe an indication that she's had some aspects of lips done, or that she's open about the fact that she has regular facials to keep her skin looking great, there is sort of an acceptance in society. Whereas men particularly, I feel, and it could be, I'm not a man, so I can't speak for the male population, but they don't want their friends to think that they've had work done. I don't know why. Maybe it's seen as feminine or weak, or who knows. But there is, that conservative approach, I think, is really important, perhaps even more so
Yeah.
when it comes for the men.
Do you know, it's interesting. I think it's a generational thing. Younger people are much more accepting, male and female. And I think that they talked. So I was talking to some of my younger staff, and, I would have to say probably the main thrust of people that come to see me are in the 35 to 55 age bracket. But some of my younger staff were saying, there are a lot of young people that want to start their journey at a younger age. I suppose the dichotomy of that is, I don't want to encourage people who have the most, lovely skin and, they've got everything going for them to go down a road that they don't need to go down yet. So the starting point can be quite tricky, really. But I will say to them, it's all, the most important thing is healthy skin. And skin does start to deteriorate in its health at quite a young age. And a lot of youngsters also have skin problems, don't they, with acne scarring, and all sorts of other skin issues. So health, that's a lot of the dermatology that we do is actually about making sure that people have very healthy skin that's resilient. But having said all that, once they start their aesthetic journey, they will talk to each other about it. I think in our generation, it was a bit hush-hush. I think with men of our generation, they're still in that zone, but youngsters don't. They talk about it, they tweet about it, they tell all their friends about it. So it's interesting. It's a different culture altogether, and it's what I'm starting to embrace, because I'm a bit old-fashioned and think, youngsters don't really need it, except if they've got a skin problem. But actually, to start them gently and to educate them and make sure they don't do too much is quite important. And so we are getting more youngsters.
Yeah, it's interesting you were saying about the dermatological approach. So my father is a consultant dermatologist, and he told me a story many years ago that always stuck with me about my face and my skin. And he said, Lucy, if you look at the skin of a 65-year-old woman on her bottom, and you compare it to the skin on her face, her bottom will be smooth and quite not sort of lined or have aspects of blemishes and pigmentation, whereas the face, because of the sun damage just from living in England, where we don't have a lot of sun most of the time, will be completely different. So he said, treat your face like your bottom, and and make sure that you're putting factor 50, 60. I mean, he used to cover me in sunscreen as a child. I was sort of like this white ghost walking around the place because of the amount of factor 60 I had on when I was out the house. But skincare and preventative measures and education, like you've mentioned, is so important, because that's to help not just your skin look better, but also protect against things like cancer and developments of the skin that we want to try and avoid.
Absolutely. And I've heard that analogy before, and it's a really good one, because if you think about it, your bottom doesn't have any freckles, it doesn't have any freckles or skin damage, it doesn't have any it might have a few spots in some cases, but generally your bottom is kind of a very clear place where the skin is really in good order, and you don't have any of the blemishes that you have on your face. So I think that's a really good analogy.
A new tagline for the business: treat your face like you treat your bottom.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll mention that to Christina.
I mean, that would probably pick up some traction online, but I'm not sure if it's the best tagline.
Maybe not the right sort of traction.
Well, your client that in Harley Street that wandered in for the buttocks removal, I mean, he was ahead of his time, basically.
He was probably my first encounter of that sort of thing, wasn't he, really?
Yeah. That's very funny. So when you're not working, I mean, are you studying the latest practices in cosmetics and aesthetics, or what do you enjoy doing for downtime?
I play quite a lot of tennis, and also I've just taken up paddle tennis, which is really quite fun. I love to ski as well in the winter, and I quite enjoy water sports. I'm very excited because I've got tickets to the Paris Olympics.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's exciting.
So I'm going to see some athletics. I'm going to see the finals of the 400 meters, ladies and men's 400 meter finals. And also I'm going to see taekwondo, which will be interesting,
Oh.
and water polo. I'm quite sporty, so a lot of my downtime is around sport, and I do enjoy reading, and I definitely enjoy a good TV drama. So there's nothing better than snuggling up on a Sunday evening and watching a good TV drama.
And you've obviously learnt so much in your career, and you now run your clinic, and it's very successful. But what makes you curious? Is there anything that you are still interested to learn about, or where does your curiosity come from?
Yes, I mean all the time. It's a very sexy world that I live in. There's always new stuff coming out, and I'm always intrigued. I've got to a stage, I think, in my career where people are, obviously I use the technology and I use the products that I think are the best in the marketplace, and I use a lot of them. And so I get invited to go to quite a lot of exciting events in places like Monaco. And I went recently to Verona, where I was invited to go on a 3-day event, which actually turned out to be something that I found really quite difficult, but I learned a lot from. It turned out to be quite difficult because it was a cadaver experience in terms of being more familiar, blood vessels and nerves and skin levels, layers of the skin and muscles and everything that relates to safe practice, and which is why I went. But I thought, I knew that it was going to be a cadaver experience, and actually, it's really quite difficult. But I thought, but it actually does teach you a lot in terms of, it is real, and in terms of patient safety. But the shock factor for me was actually they gave me my own cadaver to work on, and I had to do the dissection, which I haven't done for years and years. But
Wow.
again, quite a difficult experience, but taught me such a lot in terms of reminding me and thinking, oh gosh, that muscle is much bigger than I remembered it, or that, where that blood vessel runs, I need to think about this, that, and the other. And it was amazing. And I get invited to some really important events like that, sometimes not that easy to do and not that joyful, but all part of the pathway. There's usually some really nice sort of things around it. So we were in Verona, and we went to see the Juliet balcony, and we went out for a lovely meal in the evening, and not that anybody felt like eating after what
Yeah, no.
but there's always new stuff coming out. So I might make my buying decisions based on my curiosity. When I'm spending, so 150, 200,000 pounds on a technology, obviously I need to know that it's really going to do what it says on the tin, and that people are going to be delighted with the results. So yeah, that's kind of, it all goes hand in hand with the business side. But yeah, the curiosity is always about, it is a very fascinating world, and I'm never surprised about what comes out next. So for instance, things like the Emsella chair, I don't know whether you've heard of it, but it's basically for people that have stress incontinence, and a lot of ladies who've had babies, it goes with the territory. You get a little bit of stress incontinence when you run, or when you go on a trampoline, or you laugh or cough and those sorts of things. So I do quite a lot of work in that arena. Is actually a chair that you sit on, fully clothed, and it stimulates your pelvic floor. Who knew? We had it at an event the other night, and actually it was one of the most popular things that people wanted to try. It's a bit of magic, really.
And you mentioned the sort of slight the reaction you had to your recent workshop with dealing with the deceased and working on them. Is there anything that shocks you anymore, or was that a moment, obviously you spoke about, that was had a reaction, but do you see anything or have any shocking things that happen to you anymore, or are you pretty sort of desensitized when it comes to things like that now?
I am probably hard to shock, but it's always amazing what people do to their bodies that both upsets me more than anything else, or maybe it's not in my world. People that donate their kidneys for, to get, £30 to feed their children, all of that sort of stuff is really grim, isn't it? I think we're very lucky in this country. We have a lot of protection. We have a lot of regulation that
Yeah.
protects people. I think probably the shocking thing is what happens outside of this country to children and particularly to women.
Yeah.
Actually, that whole female mutilation
Mutilation.
thing. I
Yeah.
mean, it's horrendous.
It's,
I've seen life. They always used to say when we were student nurses that you don't get paid much, but you do see life,
yeah.
and that is very true. And you see every aspect of life, which is the real world, and it's actually quite leveling to think that you've kind of part of the real world, and you can embrace people with that knowledge.
So speaking of difficult challenges and, difficult times, we currently face a market which is challenging at the moment. We had Brexit and COVID. We've got a cost of living crisis. And I wanted to ask you twofold in my next question. Firstly, have you found that the markets have shifted and affected the aesthetic world? And secondly, how do you, with your experience and your absolute passion for your work, how has that helped guide you through the more challenging times in personal life that you face yourself?
Well, I have to tell you that I had to close the clinic for 8 months when we went through COVID, and I sat here on this chair that I'm on now, and I had absolutely no idea what was going to happen. People were losing their jobs, people were in uncertainty in terms of whether they were, when they were going to go back to work and what that was going to look like, and whether they were going to meet people again. And I took some advice on what I should do in terms of, financially to be able to protect myself. And I wrote to everybody and asked for a holiday in terms of rent and leasing and all of those things. I think it was the beginning of April, after the last lockdown, that we reopened the clinic. And it was absolutely astounding. It was in terms of people were fighting each other for appointments. We were absolutely inundated. And I think really what happened was that the psychological effect of COVID, and also the fact that people had spent quite a lot of time on Zoom and what have you, and recognised their faces really well, etc. Obviously, there were some tragedies where people did lose their jobs or whatever. Again, what we tried to do was embrace that by helping people spread the cost of their treatment. So we did some things to help our, sort of valued customers and patients. But generally, I think it's weird, but what keeps people up there is psychology. And if people feel confident in adversity, they seem to be able to cope better. And I think what happened, we were absolutely inundated. That's how we've survived and carried on, sort of being successful.
And if you could speak to your 18-year-old self now, what's the one piece of advice you'd give her?
Choose a career that you love, and you'll never work a day in your life. And I think I mentioned that earlier on. And I think that's so important for so many young people. Everybody's got something they're good at. Stick to what you're good at, stick to what you enjoy, then you're more likely to be successful, and you've got more choices in terms of what you do going forward.
Lovely advice. So Jenny, I've got a few more questions before we finish up, because I could talk to you all day. But before I come on to my final questions, I have a little surprise of a quick rapid fire question round. So I'm going to ask you, I'm going to say 2 words, and I would like you to pick the word that you're most drawn to. You don't need to think about it. You don't need to give me an explanation as to why you've picked the word, but if you could just pick one out of the 2 words, you aren't allowed to pick both of them.
Right.
Okay, are you ready?
What fun. I'm intrigued now.
Cats or dogs?
Dogs.
Morning or night?
Night.
Vacation or staycation?
Vacation.
Netflix or party?
Ooh, party.
Pizza or burger?
Burger.
Rain or sun?
Sun.
Fast or slow?
Fast.
Sweet or savory?
Savoury.
Eggs or bacon?
Eggs.
Tea or coffee?
Coffee.
Texting or calling?
Calling.
Today or tomorrow?
Tomorrow.
Thank you.
You're going to tell me I'm a psychological nutcase.
No, it's just fascinating. It's very fascinating to hear people's answers. So in life, this is something we haven't touched on yet, but some of the guests and people I speak to have quite strong spiritual practices, be it based in religion or perhaps other aspects that they practice. Some people's religion is their, to do exercise or yoga or things that bring them into their body and mind. Is there anything that you practice spiritually or otherwise that helps you connect with yourself?
Well, that's an interesting one. I actually was, I say brought up, but my parents, my father anyway, was a Christian Scientist.
Okay.
And interestingly, Christian Scientists don't believe in materia medica. So then they're not medical people. They believe in the power of the spirit and the mind, etc., to overcome adversity and any, physical ailments, that sort of thing, which I obviously isn't sort of part of my makeup. But, I think you learn something from everything in life. And because that was my young life experience, it taught me how to be strong-minded and how mind over matter works so much in your favor so many times. I think positivity in everything you do is really important. It's so easy to be negative. It's so difficult sometimes to find the positivity, the positive, but positivity is so important. I think also you've got to take risks in life because, blessed are the risk takers because they see life, and somebody who didn't make a mistake never made anything. So you have to take risks and you have to make mistakes in order to learn. For me, the God is the good in life. So I always look for the good. I think love reflects love. If you give love, it comes back to you. If you give positivity, it comes back to you. So it's about finding some of the strength in those things that are going to add to people's quality of life.
That is beautiful. I love that. Love reflects love. I think that is a lovely moment to bring our amazing chat to a close. I like I said, I could speak to you all day about this, Jenny. I find it fascinating. So for everyone who's listening or watching and wants to find Jenny, even if you just want her advice or you just want to reach out to her team, you can find Aspire Clinic. That's at aspireclinic.com. They're also, of course, on social media, and you can find them on Instagram, and their handle is at Aspire Clinic Berks, Berks. They're also on Facebook, Meta, and their handle is Aspire Clinic. And they're also on TikTok, and their handle there is also at Aspire Clinic. Now, Aspire Clinic is the clinic, as we've talked about, that Jenny runs, and it is a clinic which really is at the forefront of the medical quality of care, but also, as Jenny has spoken about today, the love for her passion for her work, but also in the way she treats her clients and patients is absolutely outstanding. And the passion that you have for your work is really humbling, Jenny, and it's been such a pleasure to speak to you today and hear all about your career, and thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you for asking me. I was terrified, but actually you've made it quite a joyful experience. So thank you for asking me.